Yo, what's going on? Headliner Nation, Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and I've got another spicy episode of Breakout or Bust here in the 2021 season. Now, last week, Jake did an episode on second-year wide receivers, and he talked about several of them that could take a step forward here in 2021 and what that would look like. Now, he covered several guys in that episode, but there's two in particular that I want to dive a little bit more into and look at the numbers a little bit more closely to see if 2021 will be their breakout. So I've got this episode for you here. I've got another one coming right after this one tomorrow. Make sure you check both of them out and see if we're going to be drafting these guys in 2021. It's almost July 1st, though, Headliner Nation, and y'all know what that means? It means the Fantasy Headliners Draft Guide is almost here. Once again, over 600 pages of pure fantasy football bliss to get you ready for your 2021 season. You can pre-order it right now at thefantasyheadliners.com. $19.99, the best value that you will find on the fantasy football market. Ladies and gentlemen, this guide is absolutely insane. 340 plus player profiles and exclusive content, including the dynamic running back rating that you won't find anywhere else. So make sure you head over to thefantasyheadliners.com and pre-order that today. I also got to give a shout out to our main sponsor again this season, Manscaped. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got my new Manscaped stuff right here behind me. They've got great new products that maybe you didn't see last season when you were here on the channel. If you go to manscaped.com, use the code word headliners, you're going to get 20% off anything that you order, and you're going to get free shipping. So make sure you all head over there at some point in time, show them some love, and let them know the headliner sent you, because hey, if you're not Manscaped, are you really living life to the fullest? So let's see if Henry Ruggs can live his life to the fullest here in 2021. A disappointing 2020 season for the first rookie drafted in last year's draft and just didn't meet expectations. Now, at the time of the draft, I said he was overdrafted. There is no way that this guy is the wide receiver one. And like the Raiders typically do, they overdraft these guys with these potentially high ceilings. And to me, Henry Ruggs wasn't anyone that I was excited about last season. But whenever there's a disappointing season from a rookie, there's always an opportunity to buy low in year two. I mean, we're seeing it with like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We're seeing it with Henry Ruggs as well. But what is it going to take for Henry Ruggs to break out? There are some different things that I did see last season that could be pointing in the right direction for Henry Ruggs. So let's talk about it a little bit, and then I'm going to give you an idea of whether or not you should be drafting him this year. Breakout or bust. Right now, his ADP is putting him in the 11th round. So he's going the 12th pick of the 11th round right now in 12-team leagues. He's the wide receiver 54 off the board. So right now, Henry Ruggs isn't costing you anything, and you can draft him really as kind of a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 that you want to get some upside out of. His stats last year, like I said, they aren't that good, right? Only 43 targets, only 26 receptions, 452 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. You know, when you spend the type of draft capital that you do on a guy like Henry Ruggs, you hope that he does ball out a little bit more, right? Well, it just didn't happen last season. And there might be several reasons as to why that was. He did miss 3 games, so keep that in mind. But those numbers that we see there on the screen, they're still not good enough, even with missing 3 games. So what was the problem? Well, let's talk about a couple of pluses first, okay? Last year, he did have 4 receptions of 40-plus yards, right? He showed that speed. He showed that burst down the field, the ability to separate with his speed down the field. We saw that at times. Now, there were 20 wide receivers in the NFL last year that had 4 or more receptions of 40-plus yards. Henry Ruggs was one of only 3 out of those 20 wide receivers that had less than 500 yards, ladies and gentlemen. Right there, it just goes to show you that you give guys like Henry Ruggs a little bit more volume, especially when you see those big plays like 40-plus yards. There is an opportunity for him to put even more of those on the shelf. He had 4 receptions of 40-plus yards, barely even cracked 20 receptions. Imagine if we would have gotten him 80 targets last year and 50 receptions. The dude could have gone for 8 receptions of 40-plus yards. The opportunity would have been there. And again, when you look at the wide receivers that had 4 or more receptions of 40-plus yards last season, he's in the minority of guys that didn't do anything with it, okay? Not a whole lot of volume. And that's really what the problem was last year for Henry Ruggs, is he just didn't get any volume. His average depth of target coming in at 17.3 yards put him second in the league. His 16.76 percentage of targeted air yards, okay? So what this means is he accounted for 16.76% of the targeted air yards on his team. That was 67th in the NFL, ladies and gentlemen. So he averaged 17.3 yards per target, but he only accounted for 16% of the air yards on the team, which was 67th in the league. That right there is a big gap, and that is not something that you are typically going to see. His 17.38 yards per reception was 9th in the league, and this is also something that I want to talk about as well. So Henry Ruggs last year, on the passes he did catch, his average depth of target, was coming in at 17.3 yards, and then his yards per reception was only coming in at 17.38. So really, Ruggs was winning some of those contested catches, maybe coming down with the ball and getting tackled right away. He wasn't really getting any explosiveness after those big plays. However, he did average 5.69 yards after catch per reception, 22nd in the league out of wide receiver. So that number I would like to see come up, but it wasn't awful. So what this leads me to believe is a lot of the big plays that we saw down the field last year is maybe he was catching them and going down right away, or there were some plays where maybe he was getting targets kind of over the middle of the field and he was having to stretch those out, and he was only getting like 5-6 yardish per reception after catch. So really for Henry Ruggs, it's about getting him some more volume, but getting him some more volume that allows him to make plays after the catch, especially on those deep balls, right? On some of those deep balls, we would like him to beat the cornerbacks, catch the ball on the run, and be able to extend that play a little bit more. We've heard some people, we've heard some within the organization talk about with Henry Ruggs this year as well, getting him in an opportunity to make a lot of plays after the catch. So I think we're going to see that transition this year, where even maybe if they put him in the slot and allow him some of those explosive plays after the catch, whether it be some targets down the field that are now open for him, which we'll talk about in a minute, it's all about giving him the opportunity to make more plays after the catch, but giving him the volume that allows some of those numbers to increase. Okay, so we've got some things at play there that really, for the most part, kind of held him back last season. One thing that doesn't look too great if you're just staring at those top layer statistics, catch percentage was only at 60.5% last year, but he only had 3 drops. A lot of times when people look at that catch percentage and they see a lower catch percentage, they're like, oh, the guy's not reliable. He's got stone hands. He only had 3 drops, though. So drops were not an issue for Ruggs last season. That right there shows me that he had some uncatchable targets, that there were some balls thrown his way that there was just absolutely nothing that he could do with. Now, he wasn't at the top of the league in terms of uncatchable targets because of how low his targets actually were. So if you look at some of those guys that got a whole lot of targets, you're seeing a whole lot of uncatchable targets. So right here, you kind of got to look at the percentage and say, hey, 60.5% catch percentage, but you only had 3 drops. So there absolutely had to be some balls in there that he couldn't get his hands on. Those are leading to the uncatchable targets, and that's where maybe a little bit of bad luck came into play. So bad luck last year and a lack of volume. But I think one thing that happened last year that not a whole lot of people, including myself, saw coming was the breakout of Nelson Agholor. Last year, Agholor really took some of that talent that people saw back when he was drafted and put it all together in his connection with Derek Carr. He went for 28.97% of the targeted air yards on the Raiders last season. So that was 12% above what Henry Ruggs was seeing. So right there, hey, Nelson Agholor is gone now. Some of those targeted air yards that we saw going to Agholor, let's take those and give those over to Henry Ruggs. Those big plays, now he has more opportunities for those big plays that we've seen, which is just automatically going to lead to more production. Nelson Agholor in 2020 also averaged 18.67 yards per reception, fourth best in the league, okay? So we know that looking at this information here, that these guys, okay, both kind of shared the spotlight last year in terms of the deep play and the deep ball going down the field, all right? They kind of shared that responsibility. And that held Ruggs back, all right? That right there is a huge sign of Ruggs just had an issue breaking out because he wasn't able to really push through a role that Nelson Agholor kind of took out of nowhere. So let's take some of those targeted air yards and let's move those over to Henry Ruggs. Some of those yards per reception, because we saw Nelson Agholor making some of those big plays, hopefully now we see the yards per reception for Henry Ruggs go up. And Nelson Agholor also last year saw 3.87 points per touch, third among wide receivers in the NFL. Agholor last season wasn't the best season in the world. He ended up being like wide receiver 29, so it wasn't great. But he did see 82 targets, caught 48 of those, 896 yards, scored 8 times. We got to get those. We got to get some of those stats, and we got to push them over to Henry Ruggs. And he doesn't have a whole lot of guys that are going to compete for that type of spot. They do have John Brown. Okay, they brought John Brown in. They have Bryan Edwards, who I am a huge fan of, and I'm hoping now that he's kind of another year removed from having an injury and fully healthy this year, kind of working his way back as a rookie last season, now in 2021 kind of takes a step forward. They still have Hunter Renfrow, Zay Jones, Willie Snead. There's not really any names there that just go, oh my God, that's going to be tough for Henry Ruggs to break through. And he's got the draft capital. They spent a first-round pick on him, so they're going to want him to take a step forward this year. My hope is that they get creative with Henry Ruggs, that we don't just put him on the outside and we don't just put him in the slot, that we do a little bit of each and allow him to become that guy that is that big play receiver on the outside. But then if we want to get a little bit more dynamic with him and put him in the slot, we can move John Brown outside. And then Bryan Edwards is just always on the other side regardless. If Brown comes off the field and Ruggs goes outside, then Renfrow goes to the slot. That's what I want to see happen this year with this Las Vegas Raiders offense. I want to see it take a step forward in that dynamic part and moving guys around and putting them in positions to win. And I think with Henry Ruggs, I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that we look at and say, oh, this is top 5, top 10, even really like a wide receiver 1. I think he's a little bit better than the numbers that we saw last year from Nelson Agholor. So I think he's going to be right on the cusp of maybe a low-end wide receiver 2, maybe high-end wide receiver 3, with some of those plays that we saw from Agholor last year going over to Ruggs, and Ruggs kind of keeping some of that volume that he already saw previously. I don't think John Brown is going to come in and get all that. I think Ruggs is going to be a guy that we want to see get some of that. So it's not out of the question that Ruggs breaks out this season, but it's not really the breakout that a lot of people expected. When you get a first-round draft pick tag next to your name for your entire career, people are going to set some unreasonable expectations. I'm going to keep those expectations backed off a little bit. He's good. He's not great. He does some things very well. He does some things not very well. He's the guy that's explosive, He's got speed. He is not a guy with a great route tree, and he's also not a guy that I think is going to win a ton of contested catches on a yearly basis. To me, he's not a wide receiver 1. He is a wide receiver 2. To me, he's more of like a Tyler Lockett to DK Metcalf, but they don't have a DK Metcalf right now, and he's not as good as Tyler Lockett. So we got to see what they'll do over the next couple of years. So does Ruggs take a step forward this year? Yes, 100%. But he's not going to take a step forward that maybe a lot of Ruggs truthers would hope. But ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. A little bit of breakdown of Henry Ruggs and what you could potentially expect this season. Diving deep on some of those statistics. Do me a favor. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Become a part of Headliner Nation today. Okay? Let me know down in the comments below. Are you new here? What do you think about Ruggs? All of that good stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate y'all. We got a draft guide giveaway from one of my last videos. I'm going to have that in the next video that I record, so make sure you all stay tuned and see who won those draft guides from the last video I did. I'm going to get out of here. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch y'all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.